Good morning, PT on Ice crew. Happy Monday. It is 8:30 East Coast time on Monday. We are into May, and if you're watching this on Facebook, you can see that I have decided to get up and get my butt moving a little bit this morning. First time in a couple of weeks that I've had the running gear on and gotten out. So main reason why was the failed marathon. Took me back a little bit. I wanted to take a couple of weeks off, just kind of not thinking about running at all. And here I'm back. So it's about 8:30. My only concern, to be perfectly honest with you, this morning is Wi-Fi connectivity or data connectivity. So I'm hoping that people are able to get on and hear this. It looks good on my end, but not 100% sure. So looks like some people are signing on. So good morning, Sean. Good morning, Aaron. Cruz, good to see you. Okay, good. So that's good. So hopefully somebody give me a thumbs up or something if you can hear the sound. I'm in a spot where I don't have tremendously perfect, connectivity on the phone, but just felt like I wanted to be here this morning for this. So hopefully everybody can hear me and we'll get going. I got to start the timer, and I don't have my normal tripod, so apologies in advance for any shakiness. Good. Sean saw that. Thank you. Hopefully that means that we're on board. And we got the 15 minutes rolling. So, yeah, so good morning officially. I mean, I decided this morning to kind of get up and get moving. Today was going to be a little tight on time for me to get some exercise in, so I just thought this would be the best opportunity for me to do it. So grabbed one of my favorite spots, which is basically about 15 minutes of hard running uphill to get to, and got a little bit of a sweat going. Feels good to stretch the legs, feels good to be out moving. So hopefully you have the same chance if you have a blue sky like we do today. That you can get out there and stretch your legs a little bit. I mean, nothing better this time of year when there's an actual spring. So that's awesome. So today really is about carving your own pathway, and this was inspired by last night's discussion on the cohort, right? So every one of these cohorts, I feel like the conversation and the thoughtfulness seems to be getting more and more rich, and I love that. I think that's cool. To me, it's a testament to the fact that the conversation overall is getting broader and wider, and more people are starting to put the dots together. And I really just loved, listening to people talking about what we call the pathway assignment. And I guess that kind of almost have to give a little history and a little context on that. The pathway assignment is something that I feel like, in many ways, I live. Like that's my life. That's my profession. When people say to me, like, what do you do every day? That's a hard question to answer. And the reason why is because there are an infinite number of trails and pathways that we have to sort of navigate to figure out what's the best road to the top of the hill or the mountain with every single person in front of us and every population we work with. And I fundamentally believe that. I mean, I believe that that's sort of how we are really professionals in this space, and I feel like that's how we separate ourselves from someone who's more of just a technician, right? So you have your technician. The technician is the person who just follows the manual. I just show up and I read off the script and I do my thing, and and that's it, and that's okay. There's real value in that, and one of the main values of that is that more people can do it. It doesn't take a lot of critical thinking. You just kind of go in, you plug, you play, you go forward. And for a while, as a therapist, I've kind of had this message, and in a sense, it's not always a welcome message, that we are professionals and we should act that way, and that professionals really just sort of are presented with a problem and are willing to take lots of different threads of information and piece together, okay, what's the best pathway in this situation? And I think, for me, that was sort of laid down when I was taking my boards, years and years ago. I was one of the first groups who kind of got the multiple potential right answers test idea, right? So like, yeah, A and B might be garbage, and C and D could both be plausible and both be right, and you have to kind of decide which one is the best right answer. And I really feel like that is the essence of what we're trying to do in this health promotion and prevention space. A big part of it is this idea that you're carving a pathway. So years ago, I don't even really know how many at this point, but years ago when we bought Basecamp and we decided we were going to move into this space, we started talking about like what our role really would be, in this space. What would we really be doing? And what we kind of decided on as a group was that we would sort of be on the journey, that we would be sort of trail guides on this journey that people are having called health, and that they're navigating their entire life, through this journey, and this navigation process is hard, and it's kind of filled with obstacles and barriers and lots of sort of brush, and you got to figure out ways around it and over it and through it and all that, and that having a professional sort of connected to them would be a very, very good thing and a very valuable thing, and in a sense worth paying for, even if that meant reaching into their own pocket and paying for it. And so last night we started to go down that road a little bit. That's one of the first main assignments in the in the course, and it's really cool to see people start to put this idea of fundamental components of health, which of course we call elements: move, fuel, recover, endure, connect, and how that can translate through iterations toward an injury or an illness or a pain episode or even a cost and a claim. And that when we sort of get that, we sort of get the entire case to be made for keeping people healthy and keeping them out of the healthcare system, and that is incredibly valuable, not just to employers, but anybody who's kind of in the space of getting the most out of themselves. Now, that could be an employer, productivity, those kinds of things. It could be a person. We certainly know lots of people who just want to live the best version of themselves. So meandering a little bit, that I woke up this morning with that kind of still in my mind, and a really good conversation, and I'm excited to see what comes out of this group. This group has some really cool ones. I would say that nutrition and sleep seem to be a thread that are coming out more and more, which is awesome, because it's I think a realization that we're not going to be able to just do this thing on straight up healthy movement. Like, it doesn't matter how well you move or if you move enough if all of the other systems aren't doing well. And so I was inspired by that concept. And so I woke up this morning and I pulled an old book off the shelf, one that at this point is old. What's cool, of course, is that with books, sometimes they sort of come back around. This old book, this ancient history of 2005, that I grabbed off the shelf this morning to take a look at again. I haven't scanned it in a while. It's called Making a Good Brain Great, and it's written by a physician by the name of Daniel. I don't know if you pronounce it Amen, A-M-E-N, or Aman or Amen. I'm not really sure how, and I'm sure I'm butchering it. The bottom line is that it's a cool little book, and I would say one of the first times I read about this whole idea of kind of the central governance of the brain, right? And so he goes through, and this guy essentially is a CT scan and functional MRI guy, and he does a lot of imaging. But what he's done is he's sort of linked back imaging. He was probably one of the first physicians to do so. Linked back these images and scans of the brain to certain ailments and behaviors and attitudes and thinking and just lots of different things. And he kind of has developed this how to keep your brain healthy idea. And I don't know since 2005 how much it's really taken root. But the cool thing is that the themes are similar to what we're all now discovering and talking about. And I love that, because it just goes back and it tells us what we really need to hear, which is that there are certain principles of health that they're just always going to be. It's like gravity. They're not necessarily good things. They're just things, right? Like they're good. Gravity is a great thing as long as it keeps your feet on the ground, but doesn't, so heavy and oppress you to the point where you're smashing to the floor, right? Like without it, you would float away. It's a bad thing, without it at all. But too much of it could certainly weigh you down, literally. And so in a sense, these kind of principles of health are exactly the same idea. And so, going back and kind of skimming through these chapters, it makes me want to read the book again. I've got so many books I want to read that I'm not sure I can actually go back through it again. But some of the things that are cool in there is this guy in 2005 in a book, and so we know, of course, books are, years behind the actual literature. So that means that probably late 90s, people were starting to talk about this. He's talking about how sleep can, changes can upregulate or downregulate the brain. I mean, that's basically what he's talking about. He's talking about how certain diets and high processed, high sugar diets are going to rev the system up and sort of get it near threshold of breakdown. These are concepts that I feel like we all have to be able to kind of take into account. And it's cool for me to see that is happening. Now, I think the main takeaway, and I hope the cohort gets this, and I don't know, but I mean, I think by the end of the course, everyone seems to get this, is that the main takeaway is that these are your pathway, right? This is your pathway. This is your client's pathway. You don't get to decide and put somebody on a specific pathway that you want. Like the professional doesn't get to direct everything. The professional is that like consummate trail guide. It's the person who's with you. It's there providing counsel, providing thoughts, providing insights, providing analytics, saying, hey, here's what I think you're facing. Ultimately, this is going to be your decision. Ultimately, you're going to live with the consequences. This is your body. This is your future. This is your health. I'm just a trusted guide with you. And I feel like if we could get that, if we could just kind of like connect on that message somehow as professionals, I feel like we would do a whole lot better. To be perfectly honest with you, like it's frustrating as hell for me to be on the pop health chat and to see some of the negativity that comes back with people who are saying, well, lifestyle, it's not all lifestyle. Yeah, no kidding. Just like it's not all manual therapy, and guess what? It's not all pain science either. It's not all of anything. It's all of everything. Like that's the part that like we seem to be missing, is that we still want to get it down to that one thing that like is the decisive factor. Like, hey, I hate to break it to you, that doesn't exist. We're humans, we're complex. There's all sorts of things that occur, So one of the things that I love about the pathway assignment is that there's a whole category You know, there's a whole category, and I sometimes laugh to myself because I get challenged on this. You know, people often see me and talk to me and think, okay, that's the lifestyle guy who's like the rah-rah, like live a healthy lifestyle and don't think about, you know, the environment that you're in. But there's a whole column called influences. Things like the environment, things like your neural networks, things like your genome, things like your microbiome, things that you didn't necessarily, you know, choose, you kind of inherited. And so last night was really cool, and I'm not going to like point anybody out or poke anybody out because it's early in the cohort, but I got to tell you, there's such diversity of thought. Diversity itself was brought up. You know, what about being in a diverse and appreciative workplace where you feel included? That is awesome. That is awesome. That is professional thinking. And in my opinion, like, that's what we need. We need to be willing to look at all the factors and then actually dive in and start to say, hey, this is the best of the right answers. They're all potentially right answers. You know, is exercise the best answer in every situation? No. Is it likely a good answer? Yeah, probably. Which in my mind is why we've gotten away with a lot of crap that we've gotten away with for a very long time. You know, like nothing makes me happier than to see people kind of, you know, nudging along. People like Dustin and Christina who are pushing people and saying, hey, listen, you got to load up these senior bodies. They need it. You know, nothing makes me happier than that. But we've gotten away for a very long time with the idea of, look, if I give you anything, it's probably so much better than nothing that I can get some kind of a positive outcome. So bottom line is that as professionals, we have to choose our own pathway. We have to decide, how am I going to get from the influences all the way to the outcome I want? You know, that doesn't mean I'm going to just throw an outcome tool out there and measure it pre and post. It means I've got to consider that entire pathway and I have to plan for it. And I think when we start doing that, we start taking control, because now all of a sudden we're given the ability to make a choice. You know, the freedom to actually choose and to live with the consequence of that choice. And I mean, I'm gonna like pause there for a second. Like, the freedom to choose and to live with that choice. And I feel like if you listened last week a little bit about, you know, kind of my conversation about sort of despair, you know, and the idea that it's kind of like both meaning and suffering. What that says is that suffering is not all bad. It's part of the human condition. It's what allows us to grow in many ways. We shouldn't always avoid it. We just shouldn't let it get out of control. Okay? We shouldn't let it hijack our brain. We shouldn't let it overpower the physiology, and understanding, of course, that meaning may offset that. So there's that. But then on the other side of that completely is the concept of when you do that, when we all do that, when we empower others to do that, even better, when we allow that to occur or facilitate that to occur, that is when all of a sudden people are given the freedom back. That's when they have, you know, what we might call self-efficacy, but ultimately what it is freedom. You know, it's finding. Now, I had some great commentary after last week, and Jeremy Fletcher, and I had some text back and forth, and I loved it. And one of the things that he was talking to me about was that he really loves the word truth there. Like, hey, you've got to find your truth. Right? And so I was kind of thinking of it in freedom, and more in the idea of like, yeah, almost like libertarian paternalism that we often talk about with nudge theory, right? This idea of like, yeah, the environment does nudge you along a little bit, sort of where you're placed. But in many ways, if you can create a consciousness of that scenario, if you can allow yourself to understand and say, hey, I get it, this is where I'm at, I may not be able to change that, but I can choose how I respond to it. Okay, there's something there. That's a certain level of consciousness, of mindfulness. So there's that. And his push to me was, hey, I really like the concept of truth there. People finding their truth, almost like their true north, like their beacon. Like, I love it. I love it. I know I've talked to Allie and Alexis before a little bit about, you know, the concept of, you know, having a lighthouse. We talked about that a little bit, that was a big, important part. I think all of these things are intertwined. And so, you know, I guess my point is this week, you know, sort of Monday with Pop, and hang on, I see this, Justin, the practice is to face our suffering and transform it and to bring about our well-being. I love it. I don't know if I can hit the see more. Let me see what we got. Oh yeah, the actual quote. I'm not even sure how you say that. Very, very cool. Yeah, exactly. So it's almost the idea. And, you know, one of the places that I really love, I've talked to people a little bit about, is M. Scott Peck. M. Scott Peck opens his book, The Road Less Traveled, not like the poem, The Road Less Traveled, but like, you know, his book. And I think he's a psychiatrist. If not, he's a PhD psychologist. But he basically starts the book with the idea of, look, life is hard. Like, that's it. Like, you got to get that. It's hard. It's not going to be easy. No one promised that it should be easy. But once you understand that it's hard and you kind of like internalize that it's hard, then actually it ceases being hard because you just are okay with the difficulty now. You just roll with it. You just understand that it's part of life, that's part of what hones us. That's part of what tempers us and makes us as strong as we can be. So, you know, like, I hope that this doesn't come across as me cheerleading. I'm not at all. Like, I mean, maybe excited about it, yeah, and yeah, I'm excited about this stuff, you know, because I've seen the other side. I've seen people kind of liberate their life, and some people in some bad situations, and some bad situations that they've grown up in, that really, it could be, you know, enough. Like, that could have been enough for them to kind of break them down, but it didn't. And so we have to study those people that it didn't, right? Like, it didn't break them down. Like, somehow they were able to take the circumstance that they were in and turn it into something amazing and turn it into something awesome. And that there's something there for all of us. So that, yes, you know, in most cases, we, if left alone to our own devices and let nature take its course, we probably will become a product of our environment. The influences will overtake our ability. However, if we're willing to bring that little bit of light, if we're willing to go into the darkness and we're willing to show people that they actually do have a choice in this situation, you know, and maybe even just be there when they discover this and just kind of, hey, listen, absolutely, I'm so glad that they can begin to choose their own path, and we as professionals can walk with them a little bit on that journey. That the information that we have, the fact that we love to read all this stuff and have all this evidence and our curious minds, like, that's awesome. We can put that to our advantage and the advantage of society overall. All right, I've got 13 seconds. I better just wrap it up. This thing's going to beep. I got dogs who are ready to run. Beautiful morning, and I'm running out of time quickly. I hope that sparks something in your brain, you know, because, again, I think we're going down that road a little bit into the central governor. Oh, the dogs heard the bell. They're on their way back. The central governor, I think we're gonna dive into that a little bit more. I think we're gonna start to realize that, you know, the brain is something that we can mold and sort of, you know, push for good. You know, we don't just have to see the negative aspects of it. We don't just have to see when people are hijacked. We can also look at it and say, okay, like, let's make sure that we're going the right way with this thing. So things to think about. I don't know, maybe food for thought. Hopefully you carve your own path a little bit. And for those of the people who are kind of in this cohort, I can't wait to see where you go next with your pathways. Awesome start. Okay, everybody, it's Monday. It's only Monday. I hope the sky is blue in your part of the country. It is for me. I'm going to get my 15 minutes of hard running down the hill. Hopefully it'll be less than 15. But bottom line is this, it's Monday. Make it count.